Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny with another edition of the Yak with Mac. It is me riding solo today, and my message is simple. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. How can I lead? Listen in. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny with another edition of the Yak with Mac. I'm looking around, man, and it's just me. It's just me. But it's all good, right? Riding solo. Today, I've got a message that I hope will inspire you. Yes, we're still going to have more guests. Are you guys loving the guests that we've had of late? They have just been awesome, and hopefully they're adding a lot of value to you and your career and the career of even other leaders that are around with you. So today, let me just give a couple of quick reminders. This is the place to come to, leaders. This is where we want to encourage and inspire you to be great influencers. You got to influence these days, right? You can't just walk around telling folks what to do. What are you doing lately that is helping you develop? Are you doing at least 10, 15 minutes? I'm saying 15 minutes at least a day for self-development. You've heard from our leaders of late that I've interviewed. They're very, very intentional. You heard Lori Williams talk a lot about routine and rhythm. And we all have that in some sense, right? You might eat breakfast or dinner at the same time. You have to throw that self-development into that routine and rhythm that you might already have. Get it in there somehow. Maybe you have a specific time that you work out every night or every morning. That's great. Throw that same rhythm, that type of rhythm in there when it comes to developing yourself. It is so important. Okay, I'm going to jump into what I want to talk about today, and I want to give a lot of props to our internal team because I had read this article maybe about a month or so ago on the Harvard Business Review. You guys know I'm a big fan of that. That's my little self-development thing. And I pay the $10 a month for subscription. I started to say prescription, although it is medicine for me, right? But the subscription for that. And I read an article about how do I lead when I'm exhausted. And it is so funny because I'm coming across people more of late, probably even more of late than last year, that just tell me inside and outside of T-Mobile, in my personal life as well, that tell me how exhausted they feel these days. And I'm curious about that, so I'll ask a lot of questions. What's causing that? And a lot of times it's not their job. A lot of times, what I found in some cases is stuff happening outside of work, right? It's things happening in the news. It might be things happening in their family. It might be a concern for a family member. There are a lot of things that can really drain us, that cause us to leak, right? We get filled up every morning, right? We wake up with a lot of expectations for the day, and we're filled up, right? But then there are things that happen during the day that just cause us to slowly leak. And that causes us to be exhausted. Lo and behold, I open up an email from the Manage and Lead team, and there is a link to that article with the Harvard Business Review. So I'll pop that link in here when I post this podcast because I think it's a great article to read. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that article, some things that are real specific to that article, but I want to give you my own perspective on that. And so I'm going to call this, I'm just tired. How do I lead now? So if you're a leader of people, which I think most folks that are watching this are, you have two things to really be concerned about. You've got to be concerned about yourself and have that good self-awareness. Are you totally exhausted? And how can you lead when you're totally exhausted? But you also have to be in tune to your people as well, right? Are they totally exhausted? And how do you lead them out of it? How do you lead them out of it so they can still be productive every day? Because here it is, at the end of the day, we still have a job to do. But mental health, we've seen a lot of examples of that lately with Simone Biles and folks that have put it out there and courageous enough to put it out there, just my opinion. Mental health is a real thing. So being exhausted physically and mentally can contribute to very poor mental health. And who's going to do the job effectively then? Nobody, right? So we've got to get past that. And you as a leader have got to figure out two things. You've got to figure out ways for yourself to get past it. and you have to figure out ways for your team to get past it. I want to see if anybody can relate to this. Several years ago, I had been through such a tough stretch at work. I was doing so many different things, and I was getting in very, very late in the evening. And one night, I was driving home on the Long Island Expressway, and it probably wasn't that late. It was probably 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, which it wasn't, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. But I was this tired. And this ever happened to anybody where I'm behind the wheel and I just cannot keep my eyes open? I had the windows down, and it was in the winter, so it was cold. Cold air's hit me in the face, had the windows down, music blaring. I'll never forget it. It was a Bon Jovi song that was on Bad Medicine. It wasn't in the 80s, but I was playing an oldie station, so that was on. And I just still couldn't keep my eyes open, but I was determined to get home. And finally, I fell asleep. Probably only for a few seconds, but I fell asleep long enough that I drove off the road. And I was actually driving in the median on the Long Island Expressway. And thank God for an angel in the form of another driver who came alongside me and was honking the horn, saw me kind of go off the road and probably saw me with my head down sleep, still driving. At this point, I'm probably doing 65 miles an hour, and I'm headed straight for a pillar. And that woke me right up. I looked, I was like, oh, thank God I didn't panic. I was able to just easily get back on the road. And so that is some serious exhaustion, because every fiber of my being wanted to stay awake. But I was mentally drained and I was physically drained. That's a bad, bad mix. How many of you can relate to that? Always pull over, right? Don't do what I did and have that determination to get home. I just, I don't want to stop for a little while. Always pull over, get out, walk around, do whatever you have to do, because that is the most dangerous thing you can do, is drive while you're really, really tired. There are so many outside factors that can cause you to have that mental and physical exhaustion these days. If you look at the news, the stuff in Haiti breaks your heart. The stuff in Afghanistan breaks your heart. All of the severe weather, we had some severe weather here in the Northeast, breaks your heart, right? We see what happened to the folks in Tennessee. Just unbelievable. Breaks your heart. COVID, all of this stuff now you have to go back and do, right? We're still in this. That not only breaks your heart, it mentally and physically can drain you. So leaders, what do you do? Because if you're like that, you're going to lose your determination. You're going to lose your energy. You're going to start the day off wrong. And none of that you're going to even be aware of if you don't have that good self-awareness. So if you've watched me even for 5 minutes, I talk a lot about emotional intelligence. I'm a big believer in it. And one of the things on emotional intelligence is for you to have really great self-awareness. So you've got to be able to look in the mirror and even call your boss and say, I'm mentally and physically exhausted. I'm not sure I could do this today. I need a mental health day. I need something, or I need to do something. And maybe your boss actually can help bring you out of it just by being that ear and listening. So if you start to now think about your team, and let's say you're not in that funk, but part of your team is, how can you be that rah-rah leader every day? Because that probably doesn't work, right? Everybody's mentally exhausted. You're like, all right, guys, let's go get them. That's me. That's me sometimes, right? And it's hard, especially if you're running a virtual team or you're working virtually and you don't see them all the time, to really kind of figure out, is my team just exhausted, and what's really exhausting them out? And here's the thing, you pile on all that stuff, and our standards as a company continue to go up. We're going places, right? We know where we want to go. We want to go number one. We want to take Verizon out. That's not going to be easy. That's going to take each and every one of us really pulling our weight and raising up the level of our game every single day. But how do we do that if we are exhausted? We all know this too. Physical exhaustion is different from mental exhaustion. I can remember how tired I used to be in college when I would study for an exam, and I would fall into a deep sleep. And that ever happened to anybody, where you have your textbooks right there and you just fall asleep sitting up reading the textbooks? Next thing you know, it's 2 hours later, right? And you're just, how did that happen? That mental exhaustion can be brutal. And today we've got it all, right? So let me now jump back into the article and hit on some things the article says there, because now what do you do? What do you do about it? So as a leader, you've got to figure out what's really urgent and what's really important. And the urgent things that need to get done, you need to really help your team along with those. The important things that need to also get done every day, you also need to be clear in your direction to your team. Listen, I understand how you're feeling today. This is important, but if it gets done later in the day, that's fine. If it gets done tomorrow morning, that's fine. This is the urgent stuff that I need us to really focus in on today, and I know where you're at right now. So let me know so I can maybe get somebody else to do this, or I can do this myself, or I'm going to be right here to help you along to do this. Really know what the differences are in urgent and important. Here's the other thing, and this is a tricky one for leaders, right? You have to really balance compassion and containment. What does the article mean by that? I'm just going to put it into my own words. We all probably lean toward the compassionate side. But like I said, the reality is the job still has to be done. So you have to kind of balance that out. Containment also means if you have, let's say, 12 people on your team and you've got 2 or 3 folks that are really feeling burnt out and exhausted, you've got to be able to target them and get them back in the right direction. Whether that means that, hey, take a moment, take a few moments, take a day, whatever, because you don't want that to now spread to the rest of the team. Because if we start to talk about the things out loud that are really so going wrong in our world today, it will exhaust everybody. It really would. Now, there's a balance there, right? Because I've also talked about the importance of having that open communication. So you've got to really be able to balance that out, because maybe you've got 9 other people on that team of 12 that, hey, they could talk about this stuff and then go right back to doing their job. They can compartmentalize some of it. That's me. I'm able to do that at times. Doesn't mean I don't feel for the things going on in the world today, but I could put it to the side for the moment and get the job done. Not everybody's like that. In fact, there are a lot of people that aren't, and you've got to, as a leader, figure that out. So containment or compassion, which one do you use at that moment? I'm not going to talk much about compassion because I think as leaders, most of us are compassionate, and we've had a lot of practice in this last year to be compassionate. Energize everyone every day. Now, that contradicts a little bit about the rah, rah, rah every day, but figure out different ways. I'm going to give you an example of what I said to my team this morning. I just sometimes send them goofy stuff so they can take their mind off of things for a few minutes, right? Mind off of work and everything else. So I sent them, I said this week I'm going to send the best song remakes of all time, in my opinion, right? So I sent them the video of UB40's Can't Help Falling in Love with You, the remake of the old Elvis Presley song, which I think is one of the best remakes of all time. It really was. But I talked a little bit about it. That song stayed #1 for 7 weeks in 1993. And it was in a really, really bad movie. I love Madonna, but that was a bad movie. Sliver was the name of it. For those of you old enough to remember that movie in 1993, I don't recommend going to watch it for a lot of reasons. And so you can do little fun things like that, especially if you're seeing your team in person, that can get everybody's mind off of it for a few seconds. So, and that can energize people, right? Give them a little bit of a laugh, give them a little bit of a memory. Yeah, I remember that song. That was great. Or I've heard that song. It's a great song. I don't remember the Elvis one. I'm going to go out and listen to that, right? So I think that you could find those ways without just rah, rah, rah every single day, because if someone is physically exhausted, they don't want to hear your rah, rah, rah stuff. Put that to the side for now, right? Okay, finally, resiliency is so big. Read the article and what it says about resiliency. We need to be able to pivot to kind of be the rubber band man in a way, and be able to kind of move with the flow and really have your team follow you, right? All of those points that you've built up from the time that your team has been with you is going to be so important right through now, because you want them to really follow you. Here's the last thing I'll say and we will wrap up. Just that oxygen mask analogy goes, it's such a great one. I don't know who thought of that, but how if you're on an airplane, you know, they tell you if you're traveling with an infant to put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then on the infant. I'm sure there are people that have done that. I know for me that would take a lot of thought. Thank God nothing has ever happened like that when I've traveled with my kids. None of my kids are infants anymore. But I know my first instinct would be to put the mask on them first, right? But how can you put the mask on them if you've passed out? Same thing. I mean, it's such a great analogy, worth repeating. Same thing if you are exhausted, if you are tired, how can you leave? So you've got to take care of yourself first. Whatever way or however that looks, you've got to take care of yourself first. Okay, gonna wrap up and leave it there. We've got some great guests lined up. It might be me for another week or two, but I'm working on some more guests that will encourage and inspire you to be great influencers. So leaders, for now, this has been Kenny. This has been the Yak with Mac. We will talk to you next week.